Visual and Environmental Supports for Students with Autism Spectrum Disorders, Lindsay Decker, Arkansas State University. Abstract. There are various research-based methods, strategies, and interventions that have been proven effective in teaching students with autism spectrum disorders. It is crucial that these methods are not only implemented in the special education classroom, but that they are also included in the general education classroom as well as any other potential area where students with autism spectrum disorders may benefit from them. All individuals are unique, and therefore one learning strategy may be successful for some students, however others may require a different approach. Not all individuals with autism spectrum disorders will have the same needs and skills, and in fact, autism spectrum disorders can have a wide range. Visual and environmental supports have been proven highly effective when teaching and communicating with students with autism spectrum disorders. There is an endless amount of ways in which any student, especially those with autism, could utilize and benefit from such supports. They can be implemented by all educators, therapists, parents, or anyone who interacts with a child who has been diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder. Introduction. Over time, we have become more educated and aware of autism spectrum disorders, and therefore we have gained a better understanding of the obstacles that these individuals face daily. According to the DSM-V, the areas that may be impacted in autism spectrum disorders include deficits in social communication and social interaction, as well as restricted or repetitive patterns of behavior, activities, or even personal interest. With such deficits, students can struggle in school as well as in their natural environment. The goal of an educator is to educate students so that they become successful and reach their full potential. This may be more difficult to do in an inclusive classroom, however, there are various tools available to assist in effectively educating students with autism spectrum disorders. By using visual and environmental supports, we can begin to see improvement in student independence, a decrease in behavioral problems, enhancement in the student's understanding and expectations of information, as well as gradually fading adult problems. Students with autism spectrum disorders may have various developmental deficits resulting in challenges at school as well as in everyday life if there are not certain methods, strategies, and interventions applied. Research has shown they think and perceive things differently than others because their brain is wired differently. These individuals have less ability to block sensory input, can struggle regulating emotions, as well as transitioning to less preferred activities. They also may have trouble following verbal instruction and can become overwhelmed easily. By implementing environmental and visual supports throughout our schools, individuals with autism spectrum disorders will be able to become more independent, gain a better understanding of their teachers' expectations, as well as complete certain tasks that without such supports would not be possible. These supports are not only conducive when implemented by educators, but are also highly encouraged in all natural environments, which can include the student's community as well as their home. By implementing various types of environmental and visual supports, we can increase our students' overall success, which can include their academics, social communication, as well as behavioral improvements. Literature review. All individuals are unique. They have their own characteristics that make them who they are, as well as their own set of strengths and weaknesses. It is crucial that educators connect with their students and get to know each of them as individuals they are. If an educator does not know their students as well as their personal needs, then the chances of helping that child become successful are much lower. Some students may require different teaching methods and accommodations. Autism spectrum disorders have become more prevalent in the last few years, and there have been new research findings about these disorders. Just because a student has an autism spectrum disorder, it does not mean that they will fit under the same category as the next child with that disorder. These students are also unique, and what works for one student with autism spectrum disorders may not work for the next one. Today, we have so much more knowledge and available resources at our fingertips than in the past, and it is important that we utilize those resources to help our students become successful. Some students may learn better with technology, and others may learn better with other types of supports. There are so many options for incorporating visual supports throughout the classroom, and getting to know your students will help depict which type of support will best suit them. It is very important to collaborate with your student's family where you are gathering information regarding your student, as they have been with that child the longest, and more than likely will have the information that will be beneficial to you. You may also gather information from other teachers who have had the opportunity to work with your student, as well as their therapist if they have one. A study was completed where mothers were taught simultaneous prompting by a CD, and then were required to teach their children with developmental disabilities a chosen skill they had watched. The research from that study proved that by using visual supports to train mothers, they were able to provide successful, home-based instruction to their children with developmental disabilities. There are many different types of environmental and visual supports that can be applied throughout schools in order to give all students, as well as those with autism, a better chance for success. All individuals crave structure and organization to some extent, and this is especially true for those with autism spectrum disorders. The number of children diagnosed with autism spectrum disorders is steadily increasing. The Individuals with Disabilities Act requires that students with autism spectrum disorders have the option to attend a public school and become educated in the general education classroom as much as possible. Students with autism are still eligible for special education services in segregated classrooms. However, it is occurring more that such students requiring special services may be educated in an inclusive setting while receiving those services. Since students with autism spectrum disorders struggle with deficits that could hinder their learning, educators often find it challenging to have them in an inclusive classroom. In Ontario, Canada, there had been a study completed to gain insight into some of these challenges. 13 educators were thoroughly interviewed, and they had reported such challenges in creating an inclusive environment, managing and understanding of autism spectrum disorders, as well as their behaviors and the lack of resources available to them and proper trainings regarding autism spectrum disorders. Mainstream teachers can implement environmental and visual supports in order to adjust the learning environment to meet the needs of their students. A study was performed in New Zealand in order to explore the effectiveness of implementing visual supports throughout mainstream classrooms as well as home. The participants were referred to the study by either a parent or a teacher based on concerns, signs of frustration, disorganization, high anxiety, as well as not being able to keep up with their peers in academics. The children and parents went through an assessment process and voiced their concerns regarding their child. An observation then took place in the child's home as well as in the classroom in order to determine the course of which visual supports would be required, as well as their location. After choosing the appropriate supports, they were addressed with the student, their family, as well as their teacher. The results from the study comprised of 21 out of 23 families reporting that they had seen an increase in independence in their morning and evening routines, as well as 2 of these families reporting that their child had also been able to take on extra responsibilities due to the implementation of visual supports. There were also reports of decreased anxiety since their child was not as frustrated. Friedlander informs us that students with autism spectrum disorders may benefit from visiting the classroom before school starts so that the student will become more prepared and have a visual to increase their anxiety ahead of time. Another visual support that has been found effective is the use of social stories. There are various ways that these can be implemented to the student, such as written documents, paired with pictures, audio recording, or even used with visuals. Grates describes a study that was done involving participants who were struggling with behavior issues. In his study, a specific behavior was targeted, and throughout this study, a social story was used to help address the student's behavior at the appropriate time. The story would begin with "I can" or "I will," and then would further describe how to positively correct that student's behavior. The use of social stories was highly effective in that study, and there was a decrease in inappropriate behaviors. Implications. Many individuals use visual supports during their daily routines without even realizing it in order to keep themselves organized and successfully navigate throughout their day. We use calendars to maintain our schedules, reminders on our phones, to-do lists to remind us to complete tasks, and the list can go on and on. Without such supports, our lives can become chaotic. Parents, teachers, and other professionals have access to various types of visual supports that can be implemented into a child's routine with autism, and they can greatly benefit from them. There are an endless amount of visual representations that can be incorporated into daily routines, such as real objects, photographs, line drawings, and visual schedules. Visual supports can also be implemented throughout the environment of an individual with autism. By using visuals in the student's environment, it can foster independence and decrease the need for adult prompting. This can be very beneficial in the school setting as well as at home. Providing students with visual schedules can help them gain an understanding of time, anticipate upcoming events, and help them adjust to change by being aware of its occurrence. Visual supports are essential in providing predictability in the environment, and this can decrease challenging behaviors from your students. Images and symbols can also be used throughout the individual's environment in order to provide organization. Labeling is a great way to help organize the environment, and this can be beneficial at both school and home so the children can independently put away their belongings without adult prompting. Visual task analysis is the type of visual support that consists of a step-by-step breakdown that will foster independence and enable students with autism to complete everyday activities and tasks such as brushing their teeth, or any other task that involves ordered steps. Visual task analysis can be beneficial for children who often forget or confuse the order of a multi-step process, or even who have become dependent upon adult prompting. By implementing classroom environment strategies and supports, we will see reduced stress throughout the classroom and bring about a sense of calmness. Students with autism spectrum disorders can struggle with change, and therefore predictability in the classroom should be a top priority. Conclusion. When educating students with autism spectrum disorders or instructing them to complete daily living tasks, it is imperative to incorporate the use of visual and environmental supports. When determining the supports needed, it is important to consider your students' learning style, their strengths, weaknesses, as well as their abilities. During the determination process, observation of your student is necessary, as well as collaborating with a team consisting of your student's parents, therapists, teachers, and other members that may work with your student. Involving parents of your children and encouraging the use of environmental and visual supports at home is also going to be very beneficial to individuals with autism spectrum disorders. Students with autism spectrum disorders may have deficits that hinder learning, as well as successfully completing daily tasks if individualized by environmental and visual supports are not provided. It is my belief that providing environmental and visual supports will further a student's overall success not only in their academics, but throughout their daily lives. These supports will not only benefit students with autism spectrum disorders, but also the educators, the students in the classes, as well as the student's family and community in which they live. By providing such support, students learn to be more independent and complete tasks on their own without adult prompting, which is a necessary skill that all individuals require.